Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second TDST Roundtable. Since the early 2000s, value management has been evolving and maturing, a discipline within the software industry. And with these roundtables, we want to contribute to building a community of professional value managers, people who are product agnostic and company agnostic, and who can share their experience and vision with all the colleagues here. So in this second roundtable, each of our panelists bring over 15 years of commitment to this profession, and they have faced diverse challenges in a very, very demanding business context during the last decades. So let me briefly introduce our colleagues here, starting by Karin, who is a pioneer in the Microsoft Global Black Belt Business Value Practice, where she helps strategic customers to understand the economic impact of their investment in cloud solutions. And James, who has been responsible for the design and the implementation of impactful value creation programs for customers in the EMEA region and in Latin America with the DCX technologies and with the IFS. And Fotini, who is a leading expert in complex transformation processes. And now with ServiceNow, she's on a mission to architect and scale their value management across the customer journey following a strong strategic vision. And we have Alberto. Alberto has designed and implemented highly innovative value-based demand generation programs with SAP. And now he leads the global competitive sales programs in Salesforce. And finally, we have Ursula, who is a thought leader in value realization. Ursula has a PhD in information systems and 17 years in IT cost benchmarking. And since 2020, she leads the value measurement of cloud transformation at Google Cloud. So a very warm welcome to our panelists and to the people attending to this roundtable, and all my gratitude to let this happen. And let's learn from each other now. So I will leave you with Noelia Gomez, who is a director at TDST and is going to be our moderator in this roundtable. So Noelia.
Thank you, Jose. So welcome all to the second of our series of value management roundtables. I want to thank you for coming today, for finding the time to join us in this discussion. Before we get started, I would like to do a bit of housekeeping. First of all, you are all muted, but you can submit your questions at any time through the Q&A panel in Zoom. Alternatively, you can comment on LinkedIn and YouTube. You have to be aware that questions in LinkedIn and YouTube will come after the Zoom ones. The Zoom ones have priority. Please also note that our amazing panelists will be talking on their own behalf and never in the name of the company they currently work for or companies they have worked for in the past. So all the statements are based in their experiences as protagonists in the evolution of value management along several years. The session will be divided in two parts. The first one, 60 minutes. We will be discussing three topics that I will detail in a second. And the second part will be 30 minutes of Q&A where we will be answering all your questions. The three topics we are going to cover in the first part of the session is why value realization fails, why companies are complementing traditional dollar value KPIs with other non-dollar value based KPIs, and finally, who within the value chain benefits the most from value realization. And without further ado, let's open the discussion with one data point. So 70% of transformational projects fail according to McKinsey, and that number has stayed stable throughout the years. So James, what is going on? Would you like to start?
Thank you, Noelia. Well, I'd like to start with a misalignment between sales and delivery being a key factor in the failure of transformation programs. I think there's a challenge within the marketing and the sales component of understanding where the client needs to be, but also communicating that with the internal organization into that delivery component when it comes to actually delivering transformation on behalf of a customer. Traditionally, it takes 9, 12, 18 months for a program to actually get through a sales process, not taking into account the amount of time that the organization itself has discussed and approved any investment into a transformation. Now, if you fail to then engage the delivery teams throughout that journey, you fail to reflect on the changes within the business, but also on the actual understanding of what is needed. What is the true outcome that the customer is seeking? Sales will potentially go and say, we've got you a unicorn. It's the most amazing thing you could ever need for your business. All the things you want to achieve, we can deliver it to you with this wonderful package, and it's going to cost you X. That's great. It sounds amazing, but if you don't actually then communicate that from sales back into delivery look at the program and start to say, hang on a minute, we can't actually deliver a unicorn. We don't have a unicorn to be able to deliver. They don't exist. We have a horse, or we even have a donkey, but actually the unicorn that the customer believes they're going to be delivered just isn't achievable, because it's been a lot of talk and a lot of lovely shiny things, but the deep depth that's needed to be able to align the strategic and the tactical outcomes of the customer with the conversations that the salesperson has had into that delivery program just hasn't been put into place.
Brilliant, thank you. So, Karin, what is your experience with this misalignment between sales and delivery and value realization?
Yeah, I think that there's several different points to consider, right? And I've experienced several of them in my trajectory. One thing that I see also is sometimes transformational projects are galvanized and led by one set of leadership, and a year and a half later, 2 years later, when you can actually start seeing the results of those projects, that leadership is gone. And so that handoff between what incentivized that first leader, that vision, it's not there. And so, the why of why the project was originally taken on is dispelled. And so, I think if you peg, if you peg the success to the what and not the why, then you find yourself in a place where you're only seeing technology for technology's sake and not really the impact and the transformational force that it has on process. And so I see that as well, right? So you're not the why is not being transitioned from leadership to leadership, and new leaders might not want to pick up on somebody else's vision.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karin. So, Fotini, what is your view in this misalignment between sales and delivery?
Well, 100% agree. I was nodding on it throughout. Aligning strategic goals to business outcomes is key throughout the journey. So, golden thread of business outcomes, but even more importantly, building a prescriptive plan to achieve those business outcomes is also important in that transition that Karin was talking about and the handoff. One thing that I'd like to add is we tend to also underestimate complexity and cost of the project. So even if we've done all the right alignment, which typically doesn't happen, we tend to underestimate the change management, the process change required, and those are just afterthoughts as we start building the prescriptive plan. So beyond technology, I think sometimes we don't look at all the costs, and then there's a cost overrun, and then projects fail because we don't have enough budget. And so I think it's important to be thinking not only about aligning from a value and customer strategic objective, but taking a look at all the other costs that in a pre-sales motion, we tend maybe to underestimate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fotini. Ursula, what's your experience with this misalignment? Because you are in a position where you may or may not suffer this.
Yeah, absolutely. And +1 to what the others said. I'd like to add a very tactical aspect to this, because there's a big difference between estimating and measuring. So with the business case that we do with sales, it contains a lot of estimates. And that's okay for the business case. But when we come back and want to measure what has been realized after 9 or 12 months, then these estimates have to be replaced by actual figures. And these are often hard to get because they're not in the systems, or they are sitting with different teams, or they're very confidential. And that's also sometimes the reason why we can't close the gap between the estimate and the measurement.
Brilliant, thank you. And Alberto, do you want to add something to this? Please. You are in mute.
Sorry, thank you, Maria. Yes, I think something that is very valuable to keep alive the connection between the original goals and the initiatives developed by the business is to have a program management initiative that oversees, identify gaps, identify the resources are available, even challenging the business for the result that they are getting. And my experience is in this regard is sometimes third-party companies, consultants, even companies like the Value Search can be very useful because they are bringing experience that the companies sometimes don't have in this regard, regarding the program management of the different initiatives, business initiatives.
Brilliant, thank you. James, an afterthought on this?
Just one, and I think it's come through the theme from my fellow panelists, is it's about the vision and communicating that vision between all three parties, the sales team in that pre-sales and sales phase, the delivery teams who are responsible for actually implementing that transformation, and the customer, and ensuring that we all understand what the outcome is that's being sought. If we haven't communicated that effectively and we don't continue to communicate that throughout that journey, then we start to fail. You know, what was sold as a unicorn but actually needs to be the donkey hasn't been communicated. The delivery team aren't clear on the outcomes they're trying to drive. Sales are trying to deliver a technical solution, whilst delivery is actually trying to drive outcomes. The customer is trying to realize those outcomes to change things within their business. It's all about that communication and a partnership or collaboration.
Thank you, James. So Fotini, you touched upon the strategic goals and the alignment between the proposal and the strategic goals and the delivery teams. Could you please elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, it definitely is about what James said, interconnecting the horizontal on the value journey, but it's also about going deeper. And I think Ursula started alluding to that, into the actual plan. And being able to speak at different levels in the organization is key. So in a sales process, we're typically speaking to maybe a CIO, depending on the size of the deal, maybe a business owner. And so we're speaking at that strategic level. When we're starting an implementation project, the stakeholders change. And although we need to keep that vision and business outcomes at the right level, because that was what was signed off on, we need to double click on how are we going to achieve that specific business outcome? How are we going to ongoing track it and be able to give that, again, prescriptive guidance, implementation plan. And if things go, they're not so great, what and our partners or the service provider could be able to say, well, how can you further optimize value at a very more technical level, but then at normal executive touch points, being able to articulate all the changes. So there's this vertical integration that needs to happen that I think we're not there yet from an industry perspective, to be thinking about all the things that are needed from a technical perspective all the way up to exposing it and communicating to the business. So I would think about it as horizontal and then deep diving vertical. And where it breaks is in those both across the journey and vertical.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fotini. Alberto, what is your view on the misalignment with the customer strategic goals? You are muted again.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that first of all, is a huge problem because if this is not part of the core initiatives, is not in the mainstream of what the company is focused, then this project will not have the budget, they will not have the right resources, they will always be deprioritized versus other initiatives. So I think this is something that has to be very clear, or try to be as clear as possible from the beginning, So an initiative that is not really aligned with the strategic goals of the company can really suffer a lot. So it should be fixed as soon as possible early in the process.
Brilliant, thank you. And James?
Thank you, Noelia. I think the other piece that ties into what Fatini said and Alberto is around that business case and the ability of the customer to express those strategic goals in an understandable fashion to sales and the delivery components. Often customers are afraid to truly articulate what it is they're trying to achieve at the strategic level and the metrics that sit behind that, because those are the conversations they've had with the board and that they've used to sign off the budget for investment. What they don't want to do is expose what they feel might be commercially sensitive information to a salesperson or even into the delivery teams that could potentially put them in a position where they feel that their pricing is unjust, or that they could potentially get themselves into a commercially sticky situation. Again, that comes back to that level of communication, being able to clearly align those strategic goals, both at the high level, as Fatini said, but also at the tactical level. But what's in it for me, for those actual managers that are holding the KPIs for delivery, is key. And I think it's, again, comes back to communication and sharing understanding across the entire business, both internally and externally.
Brilliant, thank you. Karin, what's your experience with this misalignment?
Yeah, I think also one piece that I've noticed, particularly in this point in time, is that, 3 years ago with the pandemic, companies rushed into investments in digital transformation, and the whys, right? The reasons why they were investing really were very different than the reasons that they might consider today, right? So they were making these big investments because the digital capabilities were required. Fast forward 3 years, and maybe even the objectives and the vision that was set 3 years ago has completely shifted. And so there is a gap of continuing to close the redesigning of that value as well, right? Because not only do microeconomic situations change, our customers' preferences change, and the technology itself is evolving so fast that if you don't have that feedback loop, then you're missing out on truly realizing the potential. Not only for the vision that was sold 3 years ago, but also the new requirements that come up.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. Ursula, what is your experience with this? Because you have been at the end of this misalignment. I'm really looking forward.
Yeah, I think I'd like to come back to James's original point of the communication piece, because it also means that the value advisors working on the business case up front need to collaborate or be the same, who are then going in and measuring the outcome afterwards. So that needs to, that estimating and measurement needs to be aligned as well. And then coming back to what Karin said initially, when we do the business case and we align it to the strategy, the estimates are very high level, and we need to think early about how will we be able to measure this afterwards. And if we do that early, the measurement afterwards will be much easier, and we can close a bit of that gap.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And one thing that comes up all the time, and Fatini touched a bit upon that, was who picks up the cost. And Karin has a lot of experience with that. So Karin, would you like to start with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when it comes to trying to measure and track the value that you're trying to achieve, there's a big gap in terms of the capacity required to complete that cycle that I was mentioning priorly. So there's, there's not only specialized capacity that comes in these functional activities that we do, but also the scale and cross-functional nature of the role. So when you got to think about these value advisors, right? So we are folks that come from a very interesting mix of disciplines, right? That can come in and actually not only set up the measures, but then go in and track. And so, sometimes the infrastructure for measurement is not there, like Ursula mentioned, right? So like the data is not there, or simply we're not able to gather it. And so this capacity can sit in 3 places, right? So the first place would be that it sits, for example, in a client permanent structure. I think the golden path is where there is a client, the actual customer has a permanent structure called a transformation layer group, right? These folks that sit between IT and the business and are constantly looking for ways to make the most of their technology. And so I think that's the golden path, right? When it actually sits in the client, it's either an innovation team or is business transformation, something like that. The second piece is, in the partner, right? In the deployment organization, like, do they sit there as a capacity? The best path when it sits within the deployment or the partner organization I'm seeing is when it's a value-based contracting, right? When there is the opportunity to really peg those KPIs to not only the success of the customer, but also how you're evaluating success for the partner. So that's the golden path, right? And so then I see, well, the partner very much willing to pick up the bill on that capacity. And then the third place is the vendor, right? So, and even within the vendor, there's like Alberto mentioned, and James, the pre-sales group or post-sales group, like a customer success manager. And so when the vendor is picking up the bill, there's also a level of risk, right? Because a lot of the risk of implementation goes to the partner. So, there's this constant struggle of, okay, where are we going to set this capacity? And specialized capacity at that's expensive, right? So I see that as a big gap and a problem.
Yeah, thank you, Karin. Ursula, would you like to add to Karin's view?
Yeah, I agree with Karin, and I think from my experience, the projects were fastest and most successful when the customer strongly owned the measurements. They were driving it. They wanted the outcomes to show something, or to speak at a conference, or to justify another investment, or to get support for something. And if they were pulling really hard, then things work very, very smoothly. So I think the ownership by the customer themselves is key.
Brilliant. Thank you. Fotini?
I'd like to add on that, I think, Karin, on the specialized talent, beyond the value articulation, there's also missing with the pace of innovation, especially in enterprise software, there's missing a lot of resources on the how you implement. And the detail, there's products and features, there's quarterly releases all everywhere, right? So the lack of specialized talent is also something to really think about and make sure that to sustain your project, right? When the partner is no longer there, with your service provider is no longer there, does the customer also have the right talent in-house? And so I think that we're talking a lot about value articulation. We talked a lot about communication, and it feels like it's a very human. Where it fails, it's a lot of the human element, whether it's communication or lack of talent. So I think lack of specialized talent with the pace of innovation that we're seeing in software right now is something to consider for all customers.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. James?
I think the rest of the panel have covered most things, but the one area that I feel a lack of resources often apparent is the initial KPIs. Both during the sales process, that understanding from the customer of articulating the outcomes that they're trying to achieve in undertaking the transformation, but more importantly, actually, if you're looking for that value realization, being able to actually track the baseline metrics prior to transformation, throughout transformation, and on successful delivery. And that's not just on the go live, but it could be 6, 9, 12 months after that go live, when you start to see the change in the supply chain, or the impacts on the entry to a new market, or whatever the strategic goal was. not having the people in place to be able to actually track and articulate the change between the start and the end point, and being able to continue to communicate that back into the business so you can realign and adjust. If we don't have those people in place tracking those metrics, and having those resources actually looking to deliver those value outcomes, as has been articulated by the other members of the panel, then you start to automatically fail.
Brilliant, thank you. And Alberto, what's your view? You are on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to highlight the point from Ursula on ownership and responsibility of the customer in the success of their initiatives. From this perspective, of course, you can delegate in third parties also the value management of the project. But at the end, I think that the customer also can identify the best should be able to identify what is the best partner based on the knowledge they have of the partners, and then also what is the kind of partnership that they have with the specific player. So if the partnership is very relevant, maybe we'll align more with this partner, with the vendor or with the system integrator.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And so we have touched a bit upon realigning the business case. Also, Karin also mentioned how actually the business case and the use cases evolved from COVID till now. So what happens when the business case changes, or how do you actually follow the evolution of life when things happen and the business case changes? So James, would you like to get started?
Thank you, Noelia. Yeah, I think it's a key piece, and Karin articulated it very well. And as you highlight, where we are today is not where we're going to be tomorrow, and it's not where we were yesterday. I think when it comes to understanding the business cases behind value transformations, it takes time for the collective people within an organization to determine the path of travel, to articulate that business case, to get it signed off, to seek investments, to go out and find the vendors, to go through that sales process and start that transformation. Instantaneously, the business case that was written right at the beginning has probably changed. The business continues to evolve over time. The market forces that they're under start to change. Where they thought they were going to be is likely not where they are on the day of transformation. Their competitors are likely in different places, and we're seeing it at the moment with the markets across Europe and globally, where we're seeing political pressures, wars, changes to the economy, problems with recruitment, etc. All of these factors are considered by boards and organizations, but you can't predict what the future is going to be. So when you write that business case, the business case is only written as you can see it for today. And you're trying to articulate and predict the changes that you want to see as a result of that investment, but they're not guaranteed. There's no way to actually be certain that you are going to sell the volume of products that you're going to be able to produce if you can increase your output by 20%. You can't guarantee that there's not going to be a war within one of your supplier countries that's going to put a massive pressure on your supply chain. A lot of these factors will be built into risk mitigation, but at the same time, as you go through the transformation program, those value outcomes that you've articulated may no longer be the same. It may not be possible to save 20% out of your supply chain purely because your supply chain costs have gone up by 25%. We're seeing problems with the Ukraine and oil and gas, things like wheat and flour prices. Those are the things that are impacted by geopolitical events. They might not have been considered as part of the business case, and consequently, you may well bring a successful transformation into play. And when you start to look at those baseline costs against the business case, when you said you were going to be reducing your costs by 20%, when you look at where you were in the business case and where you are at the end of the transformation, it might be by 5%. But you need to be able to understand changes up throughout that program and actually communicate that back into the business to be able to justify that. You also need to be able to clearly articulate that as you go through that transformation journey, so you can adjust if something happens, to mean that you can see in the future where you wanted to go as a business is no longer viable, then you start to communicate to our delivery teams that functionality, that capability may be delivered in a different manner, or it may be brought forward, or it may be pushed out, dependent on the needs of your business.
Brilliant. Thank you. Ursula, would you like to add your view, please?
Yes, what comes to my mind immediately when listening to James's points is innovation. Innovation is one of the big areas where customers want to achieve value when they move to the cloud. And obviously what we think of what these innovative outcomes could be at the point of time we do the business case might be completely different from actually what's happening. Because they find out new things they can do that they weren't aware before. And so a part of our value measurement workshops is always a bit of a brainstorming to identify areas where value has been created, although we hadn't thought of them before. And we could use these pieces, to fill the gaps that arise because things have not worked out as we had thought before. So that's one of the beautiful things about innovation.
Brilliant, thank you. Karin?
Yeah, I think not only on the customer side in terms of innovation, but on the vendor side, right? In a cloud world, updates happen in much faster cycles. You have hundreds of features being released on every release every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks. And so the pace of technology evolution, it's really challenging how companies adopt these technologies and constantly revise the applications of those already built technologies into their business case and the value that they can deploy. And so I think there's also something to be said about this particular point in time for that gap, right? I believe as digital natives continue to grow in their career, these are ultimate our users, right? It's our users that we create capability for. And so as digital natives continue to grow in their careers, I think that pace of adopting technology is going to become a little bit faster and close that gap a little bit. We're used as digital natives to incorporate technology into our daily lives in a much faster cycle. And so I think we're going to see that gap starting to close a little bit, at least I hope.
Thank you. Alberto, what's your experience with business cases evolving?
Well, I mean, no question what James said from the beginning, that a business case needs to evolve. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the right, probably not even the right approach to get the value depending on the changes in the environment, in the company, etc. Something that I would like to highlight as well is that when a business case is work before the investment is made, I would like to call it a little bit like aspirational, no? That everyone thinks, okay, this is what we're going to get. It's true. I mean, both business and the vendor are very engaged in creating the more accurate business case. But I think before the project is launched, again, the company is really deep diving into the situation, understanding much better what are the constraints, what are the obstacles, what are the resources available, and at that point should address again the business case and have a more realistic business case.
Great, thank you. Fotini?
I'd just add to the point of we were so used in our industry to do point-in-time business cases, like we said. The challenge is how do we continue to do continuous business cases or value realization? How we do that, I don't think we've cracked it yet. How do we do continuous, other than it's very high demand in terms of labor? Is there a better way to be doing this through automation, of course, there's always a human element to it, but I think the challenge ahead is we all are aware that it needs to be continuous, but how do we do that? And there's so many, right now it's human led, and I think there's a lot of possibilities there that we're only at the beginning of. So I think the next generation or the next phase of our evolution as value management will definitely be in the automation of that post-sale and keeping the business case relevant.
Brilliant, thank you. So, so this was the end of the first question, the first point for this this part. The second topic that we were going to touch upon was why KPIs cannot be limited to dollar value based KPIs. And James has touched a bit upon the success or the failure of value realization if you only use let's say monetized KPIs. So Ursula, would you like to start with this topic, please?
Yes, of course. That's my favorite topic. And it comes back to what we said before, right? That business cases evolve over time, and things might be harder to measure than they were to estimate beforehand. So what we found and what we're doing a lot with our customers is that we quantify value realized in a number. Even if it's not possible to tag a dollar value to it. So for example, if we estimated beforehand that we will improve availability by the move to the cloud, and we assume that we protect revenue because we have fewer outages, then we can estimate the dollar revenue protected. Afterwards, it turns out the revenue per minute, let's say, or per minute outage is very difficult to measure for the customer. So often it's impossible to quantify that after the fact. So what we do is we measure the improvement in availability in percent, or maybe plus so many days availability were achieved, or plus so and so many points customer satisfaction were realized, or so many hours manual effort were saved. These are quantitative outcomes that are powerful and that show the impact of the teams and the projects, although they're not monetary. And of course, a business case needs to be done beforehand, and the values in there need to be monetized. But afterwards, after the migration, when we're looking for what has been realized, these quantitative figures are powerful as well, and they are useful to show what the teams have achieved. They can be used in marketing or in conferences to speak about the success of the projects. And that's already very, very useful for the teams who are often struggling because they cannot calculate after migration the value that had been estimated before, and they feel bad because they can't show they have achieved what was expected from them, right? So these figures can close that gap, and we see these figures travel a lot. So these measurements, like for example, so much better customer satisfaction score, or plus so many days availability, we see them being used in conferences and blog posts. So customers pick these up to exemplify or to speak about their experience, and that shows us that this is actually useful.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Ursula. Fotini?
I really like what Ursula mentioned about the it's not what we talked a lot about quantification in the first part, and now we're saying it matters, but even strategic also benefits to be thinking about. And it's also the art of telling the story, the value realization story, based on whatever metrics are available at that time. And I think that it's not easy if you don't have some of the data available, but you don't necessarily need to monetize it. And I see in the question and answers, there's something there around industry. In the public sector, you don't need to go into monetized value. You can show metrics, you can show other elements that are valuable for that organization. So going back to the initial conversation of what matters to the customer, and then articulating that story back. with whatever data is available, because we know that what we did think potentially in the pre-sales is not available in the post-sales, and things can consistently change. So building out that value story that's relevant at that given time is key, no matter if we can monetize it or not.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fotini. Alberto?
Yeah, aligned with my colleagues. I think that the improvement is made at the operational level, at the customer satisfaction level. Not always is easy to reflect that in dollar value, but there is a clear correlation with the revenue of the company, the success of the company. If you have a huge NPS or huge CSAT, or you have improved your I don't know, your logistic process in an important amount of improvement, basically. Also, I think there are strategic goals that sometimes are difficult to articulate in value, but there is no question that they are just maybe the difference between survival. No, when 20 years ago some companies were thinking we have to go to China, they knew they have to because other competitors were going there. So I mean, business case needs to have, of course, a value component, but there are we need also to have operational KPIs to track the evolution of the initiatives. And there are strategic goals that don't really need to be framed with dollar value.
Brilliant. Thank you. James?
I think for me, the key is around the people component again. You know, what's in it for me? You know, evidence shows that, you know, the retention and productivity of employees can be directly impacted by the environment in which they work and their perception of the tasks that they undertake and how easy those tasks are and how enjoyable those tasks are. Now, you know, those sort of areas are more challenging to measure, but that qualitative component of it, of the satisfaction of your employees when it comes through the transformation, how easy was that task to complete? Can you leave work on Friday at 5 o'clock to get home to your children? Or can you get home in time to be able to see them for bed or read a story? Those things matter to people. It's the motivating factor for people coming into work is not to come to work necessarily. It's the things that they do outside of work. If you can enable those individuals to be able to do that easier, to be less stressed, to enjoy their work more, you see an increase in productivity, you see an increase in retention. Those are key metrics that obviously organizations are seeking, but that doesn't mean that your actual outputs of your transformation program are going to be focused on those outcomes. It could be around the way the process works or something that makes the individual person's job and life easier, and they therefore enjoy their job and their role that much more. So I think, you know, what's in it for me is a key question that should be asked at every level of the organization to understand how you can articulate that value and deliver that value for the business.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Karen?
Yeah, I think one piece also, it's the definition of these soft metrics changes depending on what phase you are in the transformational project. So if you're thinking about the beginning and it's really purely a cloud migration, right? Then you can hinge a lot of your value into hard benefits, TCO, right? Total cost of ownership. And some of the soft benefits are less important. But once you move into the next phase and it's really applying those cloud capabilities into process transformation, you know, revenue driving capabilities are not soft benefits, right? The ability to increase leads or be able to convert more opportunities, right? Because of a sales capability, that is not a soft metric anymore, right? Those are hard dollars that you can actually quantify. And so I also think, you know, when I come into a business case, I'm aligned with business applications. So I'm usually in the latter phase of that transformation when we're really thinking about process improvement. And so those soft metrics that, you know, a cloud from a cloud economics perspective, like efficiencies, for example, become very, very important. And one last point is when you're coming on the back of a right sizing project, for example, those efficiencies are ultimately labor hours. And so those become really important in terms of the opportunity to repurpose that capacity into another side of the business that requires more attention. And so I think we also, these soft metric definition changes depending on where you are in the process or in the transformational project.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karen. So just touching on the last topic of this part, we have different value chains. So you may have cases where the vendor deploys the solution, cases where you have one integrator, several integrators. The customer may or may not be interested in value realization. So who's the most incentivized to invest in value realization and pick up the cost and invest the time, depending on the value chain kind of setup? So Alberto, would you like to start with this topic?
Yes, I think both the vendor and the system integrator have important incentives in terms of avoid attrition, increase footprint, increase the revenue of professional services, new logos, etc. And they have different levers to help the customer in terms of the specific unique experience you have in the project, in the customer industry, in terms of product support, in terms of guiding the customer to improve adoption. So what is important, I think, is the collaboration here. And the customer is in the right position. The customer is the owner. The customer is responsible for the success of the value realization, and the customer is in a very good position to try to foster this collaboration. In this collaboration, and actually, I led several projects, value discovery, some years ago, where I led solution engineers from a company and consultants from the professional services, and it was really probably the most successful project. The customer they have the clarity that it would help, it will work. The recommendations would be stronger, and the unique match of capabilities between the both organizations in terms of product knowledge and in terms of the specific consultant knowledge on the industry and the customer itself will be better for the project. And then the transition from the value discovery to the value realization was very swift, because actually the business case was very reliable, and then the customer was on board completely with this business case. But if I have to say, I think that in the most complex projects, from a transformational point of view, I think, this is my opinion, the system integrator is in a better position to lead. Why? Because I believe the unique experience of the integrator in terms of the customer industry is very differential in this sense.
Brilliant, thank you. Karen, would you like to carry on with the conversation about the value chain? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I mentioned, that I think, again, it should be a continuous feedback loop, right? So there needs to be some sort of centralized place where we are constantly going back to, is the capability delivering what we originally thought? Is there new capability that we need to incorporate to evolve the business case? And so very much the value chain does not need to be a linear journey. It has to be a circular journey, right? With at the center, obviously, the business needs and the requirements that continue to evolve for the business.
Brilliant, thank you. And Fotini, what's your experience when working in different setups with integrators, with vendors? Who has more skin on the game?
I do think it's the vendor selling the digital capabilities. The reason why, even though they're not necessarily the ones implementing, is because, especially in a cloud world or where renewals come up, if you're not properly adopting and you're not realizing value, then the customer will not renew. And so we really need to start changing our focus on we're going to sell as much as we can, and then pass it on to a partner or somebody to implement and make it successful. At the end of the day, back to Karine, it's a cycle, and it's really important. The value proposition of anybody that sells anything is that somebody realizes value. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought it in the first place. And so I think it's really important that whoever is selling those capabilities is also helping with the adoption, and is then building an ecosystems or making it easy for the customer to adopt. So it's a different lens, but at the end of the day, if you're selling something, it is because you want a step change for your customer.
Yeah, and I saw Ursula and James nodding. So James, would you like to continue, and then Ursula?
Well, I think Karine and Alberto and Fatini have already talked a lot about it, but that value component, to each individual party is different. I think there's a question that's come up in the Q&A, which says that the dollar sign is the unit measure of value. I don't think it's the measure of value, it's a measure of value. The perception of value comes back to an individual. What matters to them might be different to what matters to somebody else. Somebody who can't spend money doesn't have any value to them. If you're in the middle of the desert and someone gives you $100, if there's nowhere to spend $100, that $100 has no value to you, but a canteen of water has a much higher value to you in that circumstance and as that individual. And I think understanding that is key when it comes to that entire circle of value across the organization, both with the customer in the sales piece and through into delivery. Just isolating it in sales and trying to sell something just to get it across the line and forgetting about the outcomes the customer is seeking and leaving it to delivery to get on with delivering what you've sold, that unicorn, is going to cause you problems. Failing to understand the value that the customer is seeking means delivery doesn't know where they're heading. It's all a matter of that connection together for the whole organization.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Ursula?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to the point Alberto made initially about the collaboration, because we as the cloud provider, of course, we have a skin in the game, because if the customer is not realizing value, we're not earning money. What I'd like to underscore in the collaboration with the system integrators is that they have, or often they have, experience in doing this. They've done this many, many times, measuring value, for example, while the customers, when they embark, for example, on their cloud transformation, it's the first time they're doing that. So it's very beneficial to collaborate and pull together these different experiences.
Brilliant, thank you. So we are a few minutes ahead of time, so if anyone wants to add anything, you can go ahead. The other option is we go to Q&A. We have a number of questions already. Shall we go? Brilliant, so thank you for your valuable insights. Let's get started with Q&A. So the first question is, independently of the business case accomplishments and the KPI improvements, how much value realization practices are considering the user experience sentiments in the transition to a new solution? These qualitative elements could affect, for good or for bad, the adoption process and eventually the success speed of the transformation process. So Alberto, would you like to get started with this one?
Yes, I think it should be considered. I don't know if everyone considers in the business cases, but both the vendor and the customer have to really be honest in what is really the organizational resistance that is going to be to this change. So obviously, with an organization resistance, the change will be more complex, will take more time, and maybe the initial estimates of the business case can be a little bit lower. So I think it's important in the process to be very clear, the participation of the customer and the vendor, and with bringing their experience and honest analysis of the current organization to determine exactly the current situation, and this is in the business case. And the other one is, again, the collaboration of the vendor and the system integrator in order to establish the different initiatives that will help in this adoption. In terms of, the collaboration here will be very important to increase the adoption of the system.
Okay.
I'd like to add, Noelia, I actually have a story. OCM is really something that we underestimate all the time, and we do not put any cost element, nor is the customer willing to pay for it. So even if you put it in the business case, they won't necessarily put all the time the resources for it, which then leads to, maybe the user is not ready to use the new solution. And again, it's going back to that human element. So I have a story where I built a business case for a company, and a couple of years later, I think it was maybe a year later, they called back, and I was still at the company, and they said, hey, your initial business case, you need to come back. We're really disappointed. We didn't hit anything. And so we brought a SWAT team in to really assess what happened. Everything was well installed. It was aligned to what we had initially said, the partner, everybody. In our analysis and the SWAT team that was there, people just weren't using the system. They continued, it was a customer service management system. They were continuing to go down the other solution, which was much more phone-based and still writing notes, not putting anything in the system. And so OCM and the sentiments of people changing their ways of working is so underestimated in value realization. And even I said, there's something here to bring it up in a pre-sales motion, but at the same time, it is probably even more important to bring it up when you're setting your implementation and you're setting your plan for how you will succeed value. And so adoption is very, very much linked to the human element. And I just think that that's a wonderful question that we tend to forget.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Karen. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, again, I wanted to bring up, in the golden path, right? The best practice where we see is we actually use in pre-sale, we use user experience design tactics and design thinking to incorporate several folks at different layers of the organization into the design, the solution design. And so again, I call this a golden path because it usually requires a lot of investment of time from the customer perspective, right? And sometimes I've led workshops of 40, 50 people where we not only have, in the case of customer service, for example, the VP of customer service or the COO, but we're actually also bringing customer service agents to participate in those envisioning sessions. And so we get a sense for what is driving their day-to-day. And as part of our recommendations, we will have something like a day in the life and examples where how are these capabilities going to be transforming their days. And so I think in the best practice, that's how we incorporate, right? At least preemptively, are we aligned in our incentives, right? With the people that are actually going to be using it on a day-to-day. And to Jane's point, I have brought up, when you talk about productivity, is not necessarily just to sell more or take more calls. Heck, is probably so that you can actually have time in your working day to do what you want, right? Or to use that time for something that is not just work, but also something that you enjoy. And so we can bring that as part of the holistic story if we offer an opportunity to the end users to also contribute their perspective during the design process.
Brilliant. Thank you. Ursula, would you like to add something?
Yeah, that's also the reason why we use these customer sentiment KPIs as outcomes, although they're non-monetary, because cost and revenue, the monetary outcomes, are lagging indicators. When your customers are more satisfied, revenue will probably go up sometime, or when your users are more satisfied, cost will, and they are not more productive and more satisfied, cost will go down. So absolutely, I agree with what everyone else said. It's super important to capture these.
Brilliant. Thank you. So if we move to more questions, I have seen from Ognen. We have Ognen was one of our previous panelists. He has a long list of questions. I'm going to just get one and go to the rest, and then I will come back. But just touching upon public sector value realization, we have already gone through that. Are there any other industries that are kind of very peculiar compared to others, or any industries you want to mention where you have found that they work very differently in terms of what they understand as value, or how open they are to have qualitative KPIs? Who would like to go first? So Karin?
Sure, I can go. So for example, I work with the financial services industry and then the retail industry, or at least I'm associated with financial services. My core is retail. And when we think about frontline users, for example, the frontline user in retail is very different than the frontline user in banking. And so while in banking, for example, productivity, right? Like I mentioned, sales productivity can be a big driver. When you go into frontline, usually sales productivity is not something that they are tasked with or that you can actually measure with them, right? We're talking about the retail person, you know, checking you out at a Zara store or at any other retailer. And so yeah, it really shifts depending on the industry. Those, you know, those soft metrics or even the hard metrics, candidly, right? With frontline in retail, for example, when it comes to software capabilities, many clients are hesitant to even enable their frontline with technology because there's high turnover in retail. And so why would we even go through the effort of giving this technology capability to a frontline person that's going to be gone in 3 months? And so that's also, you know, highly contextualized value propositions for the different type of users.
Yeah, brilliant. And James, could you like to add your view, please?
I think just building on that, you know, the difference of maturity of an industry or sector, or even a client, can make a difference as to the conversation around value realization, and the complexity, but also the propensity of that organization, customer, industry to actually take value realization on as part of their approach in transformation programs. If you look at, you know, organizations where they are much more solution focused, where they feel that they're going to be buying something off the shelf, be it software or even, you know, in industrial automation or whatever it is, and their understanding is, well, we put the computer on the desk. Surely those people can use it now. You know, taking into account the conversations earlier around organizational change management, the OCM component, just putting it in doesn't create the value. You know, that maturity, that understanding that going out to market to buy something to create an outcome without taking that full journey doesn't allow you to create real value realization. You know, I've seen it in the construction industry. Construction industry historically has been quite, you know, backward when it comes to delivering technology, and they're bringing technology in at pace now. But if you talk to a lot of the senior people in some of the construction organizations, they've come from the ground up. You know, on their day as junior members of their organization, you would have all of your bricks, all of your cement, all of your materials there on site so you could do what you needed to do. Now they're moving to a just-in-time approach. They're starting to try and manage their logistics with you know, more complex technological solutions. So when it comes to the conversation, you sit down to talk to them about implementing these transformation programs. They think, well, as soon as I've got that, then surely I've got the outcome I was seeking. They don't understand the next layer behind that of being able to track those initial base metrics and KPIs and measuring those through to see that value realization come into play. So I think maturity makes a big difference, and that understanding of what value realization is key. And I think, you know, forums such as this and sharing it across the industry will only help to benefit, you know, all industries in delivering value realization.
Brilliant. Thank you. Fotini?
Yeah, the industry question is an interesting one. It really depends on margins as well. industries with tighter margins are definitely going to ask you for a very detailed business case. Industries like even manufacturing industry is one where, or engineering type of industries or companies, you'll find people want to go into more detail. There's also, Karim, you mentioned retail. I remember being with a big grocer, and the question was, well, how does this transformation compare to me opening a new store? So being able also to compare a transformation and digital transformations to that industry and how they make money is really, really, really important in how they spend their money. And so adapting, we were talking about adapting to what the customer and the customer strategies, also looking at their financials and understanding where they get squeezed is an important part. So you get much more quantifiable metrics and going into a lot of detail for industries that require it versus others if they're in their strategic goal, have higher level goals that and the way that it's written in their annual report and so on, you can always adapt by getting to know the company in much more detail. And it does vary by industry.
Brilliant. Thank you. Alberto, do you want to add something?
Yes, another angle that can influence in the relevance of the different KPIs, if they are operational, if they are more dollar oriented, is if the company is a family owned or is a large corporation. I'm company owned, but large companies as well. I saw a different approach from my personal experience, and they rely a lot on also in the qualitative inputs that we could provide in terms of strategic goals, alignment with them, not only let's say the KPIs related to dollar value.
Yeah, and just adding on this, there's a question about whether on the metrics we should include ESG as part of the metrics. So Ursula, could you like to answer this one, please?
Yes, of course. I think we absolutely should include ESG metrics in value measurement because it becomes more and more important, and companies are also obliged to measure certain things. But it is difficult to monetize, right? So what we do, for example, is we measure the reduction in emissions, reduction in CO2 footprint, or the reduction in energy consumption altogether, or the reduction of carbon energy in the energy mix that is consumed. So that's 3 examples, but there's also waste reduction, for example, that could be used. So I think there's a magnitude of KPIs that could be used to highlight sustainability value realized.
Brilliant. James, do you want to add something to ESG?
If I may, just agreeing completely with Ursula there. I think ESG is a key component of conversations at board level now. It's a main factor for organisations in their conversations when they're looking to make investments in transformation. And I think when it comes to that value realisation, it doesn't have to be the primary value driver. It can be a secondary part of a transformation, reducing mileage, to Ursula's point around, the carbon component, etc. It might be that actually being more efficient in the allocation of tasks to field agents when they're going out and delivering, work tasks when they're out in their vans, etc. Being more effective in how you manage that could be your key objective. But actually, when you start to look at that, the number of average miles that those drivers are doing decreases, and you can then calculate off the back of that the component of ESG that supports. So I think it's having a holistic view and an understanding that you may be focused in one area, but it can have subsequent benefits to other areas that you need to be understanding, and exploring those and taking those into account when you do your value realization is a key component to the approach.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karin.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think ESG is one of those concepts that can really help change a soft benefit into a material benefit, right? So Ursula mentioned environmental KPIs, for example. In my work in process transformation type of business cases, the social component is really important, right? How are these capabilities helping in the development of your people? When it comes to retail, a lot of these users are unionized, right? So these become very important metrics that signal the investment that the company is making on their people. From the government perspective, right? The G piece of ESG, you're talking about compliance metrics, right? Compliance sometimes becomes a checkbox, but it's a checkbox that, in a black swan event or a highly unlikable event, it can become really material. So again, ESG to me is one of those concepts that I try to use to change those soft metrics into material metrics.
Brilliant. Thank you. So moving on to another question. Are there any artificial intelligence or automation use cases that you are using at the moment to speed up business case creation and value realization tracking? We had a lot of noise in the last roundtable about artificial intelligence, and I think Vishal wants to know this from all of you, but I think it's also looking at a more strategic level, what is the future of artificial intelligence in value realization in general, not only to build the use cases, but for anything else. So Fotini, would you like to get started?
Yeah, I think in the last 6 months, AI has been the top word search in LinkedIn and everywhere. Every software company has come up with AI capabilities. And from a value management perspective, we're also seeing the same type of thinking. I'd say the vendors out there are thinking about this as they have access to a lot of data. In order to be able to do automation, you need to have lots and lots and lots of data, and you also need to be able to make the interlinks. So I think the players that are going to be really successful in this, I don't think we're there yet. There's some small use cases about automating research or automating, taking a look at some ROIs, and there's some use cases out there. I think we're at the beginning of seeing the results of all of this. But what I would say, and as a best practice, is having a value foundation that interlinks the business outcomes to the success metrics, to the capabilities, and then making sure that you track that to have the data to then inform what can be that automation is the way to go. But we just talked about in the first panel that we were lacking data and data collection was an issue. So there will be challenges. I think the future is bright in that area. It just needs a lot of attention and focus to gather all of that information and starting to make the interlinks so the engine can learn. I'm hopeful. That's one area that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. But the base and the maturity and the first thing to do is to create that standardized view that then gets informed through data collection.
Brilliant. Thank you. Karin, what's your view?
Yeah, so maybe I'm taking this question from a different dimension, but I'll go ahead and share it, right? Just as a practitioner of value engineering, value management, I am hopeful that AI is going to become a tool for us. Just in terms of that last mile, that closing the cycle and measurement, ultimately AI is based on data. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, one of the gaps that we have in actually tracking the success of a project is that data infrastructure. The data is just not there. And so as companies continue to invest on their data and their data estate, not only outwardly facing towards customer data, but inwardly facing enterprise data, right? And those processes become more digitized. My hope is that that's going to help us also bridge the gap in measurement and having access to that measurement. And so, from the analytics perspective, just quick application of AI, I'll be able to ask the system, hey, how am I doing with my worker productivity? And the data is there, and the model is there to go in and give me an answer, right? Rather than, all the capacity that is required to pull together 15 spreadsheets and try to get to the same answer. So I'm hopeful that AI is going to become a tool for us as value engineers and value evangelists, if you will.
Great, thank you. James, any thoughts?
Build on what Karen said. So, I think absolutely she's on the money really when it comes to that value realization tracking, and that ability to take that data from start to finish through that journey. But I think the other piece that we've got to bear in mind is that it's not going to be the solution to everything. AI will allow us to do some things, but actually coming back to the people component, which I know everybody's talked about throughout the conversation so far, the softer what's in it for me component, the feeling elements to an individual, AI is not going to be able to pick up on that. It's not going to be able to tell you how your workforce feels about a task or the environment in which they're working. Are they more motivated to turn up to work on time, or do they actually get up in the morning and go, I wish I didn't have to go to work? These are things that matter to a business, because you're looking at retention, you're looking at productivity, you're looking at that feeling of an organization, so that when you're hiring, it's an organization people want to come and work for. It's also an organization people aren't leaving, so you're not losing that skill and knowledge base. Picking up on those factors from an AI perspective is going to be much more challenging. It may be possible in the future, but I think from that initial value realization tracking around those quantified metrics, it's going to be fantastic, and hopefully it will make a big difference. But I think we still need to have an element of people component to make sure that we've got a feeling element within our value realization, so we can then align those softer benefits.
Brilliant, thank you. Ursula?
Yeah, I agree. This will be super helpful in our practice, and I'm very hopeful as well. For example, already now AI can help us in the ideation of where could value be achieved in our brainstorming sessions. It is sometimes also helpful when you're looking for benchmarks. So what have others realized in terms of cost savings in a particular area? You get a lot of answers back from the Bards and the Chat GPTs of this world. The problem that I see right now is the hallucination that we still have. So results are coming back, but they're not really, there's not really a source for it, and so you can't really use it. So for now, we still have to do a lot of manual work, I'm afraid. But I'm also hopeful it will make our work easier in the future.
Brilliant. Alberto?
Yeah. Something that still I see is the collaboration between the integrator and the vendor, because again, the system integrator will apply. They apply their specific experience in the different projects, and this is and what they have applied in different projects, what the different initiatives that they have applied is something that probably the vendor will not have ability or availability to have. So I think this will be a piece of information that the vendor will miss. So here again, another area or another benefit for the collaboration to understand in which way was what initiative were run during the project that made this success as well.
Brilliant. And Karen, do you want to add something else?
Yeah, so I wanted to just counter a bit on James' point around the ability to truly understand how the worker, the user is feeling. And this can be controversial, but when companies are utilizing productivity tools, there is technically a feasible way to gather data and signals around worker sentiment, right? Now, as we all become more comfortable or not with AI listening to us, I think that's a way in which we can, utilize that information for the benefit of the company, and more than anything, to evaluate if we are realizing the benefits that we set forth for the workers, for the users.
Brilliant, thank you. So we are moving on to another question from Jonathan. All stakeholders need to be addressed on value expectations where possible. Tracking and realizing value outcomes post-delivery is often impossible because the value agreed pre-delivery is too detailed or not believable, which means stakeholders were not addressed properly in the first place. In your view, who is mainly responsible to get the pre-sale value engagement right, the vendor or the customer themselves? So, James, would you like to go first?
I think the first statement around all stakeholders being addressed on value expectations where possible is absolutely right. I don't think that's wrong at all. I think Jonathan's got it on the money there. That communication is key. I would argue that tracking value realization post-delivery is impossible because the value agreed is too detailed or not believable. I think that it can be tracked. The challenge is that it's not believed or understood at a level that allows you to truly articulate and continue that conversation within the organization. So I think it is important to make sure that you've got that engagement right at the beginning. But to answer the question, is the vendor or the customer responsible? I think it's joint. It's got to be a collaborative approach through that sales piece. The customer starts the conversation. They'll start it internally. They'll come out to a vendor. It'll go through that sales channel. Then you've got to make sure you're bringing delivery into that conversation as well, so that they understand it. Everybody's got to be party to that conversation so that it can be articulated and understood in a manner that can actually be tracked and managed. As we said about the business case, it's going to evolve over time as well. So what was said right up front may not be the case that's delivered once that transformation comes into play. But you've got to keep that communication open and continue to reassess the value outcomes that were discussed and that are sought for the business and track those appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Ursula?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with James. The strongest business cases are those that are jointly built because the customer brings the insight on their own organization and what's achievable, and the vendor brings maybe the ideas or what could be done. They have seen other customers in the same industry, etc. And bringing both together is the best solution.
Yeah, and are there any times where you are talking about collaboration, but what happens with personal or individual interests? So if salespeople are interested in selling a bit more because the quota is, it gets them closer to the quota, what do we do in those cases? Because sometimes they're a bit cheeky, right? And they might sell things that are not necessarily so needed by the customer. So what do we do in those cases? So Fotini, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that what we have to make sure is understand where we are in the journey. So in a pre-sales world, and when we build the business case, all parties are aligned that it's needed for budget purposes. And so it's true that it's sometimes a bit inflated, and sometimes there are decisions that are made that when we do get into post-sales, things change and shift. Now, the responsibility, back to James' point, is everybody's responsibility, as long as you're really aware of what you need at that point in your journey. So when you start your implementation, the number one thing that you should do is relook at the business case. And if one wasn't done, start with a blueprint and start looking at what do you want to track given where you are in the journey. So I think it's really important that all parties involved continue to have that conversation. And because the need is different across the journey, then things will shift. So it's normal that a business case is a bit inflated, I can understand that we would love for them to be a completely realistic, but that is not what happens because we need, it's done for different purposes. It's done for budget purposes. And so best practice is as soon as you start your project, you have a baseline and you explain why there's a delta between the initial business case and this new baseline.
Brilliant. James, do you want to add something into this?
I'd just like to add another bit between that misalignment between sales and delivery, and actually the value to sales of getting that business case right and delivering on that value promise that has been communicated through that sales piece. I think sometimes business cases can be overinflated to be able to justify investment, but they can also be overinflated to justify a sale. We're going to sell you that unicorn. This is the fantastic product. Here you go. Spend X million on this, and you're going to realize 10, 100 million in value out the other side of it. And when it comes to it, people end up being disappointed. I think actually, if we move to the other side, to the delivery component, to that customer success element, and being able to track, articulate, and then communicate that value back. The value to the organization of a successful implementation of transformation, i.e. my product delivered this, and I can hand on heart say that I managed to deliver that. I can prove it, I can evidence it, and the customer being able to then say to the rest of the industry, we invested in this transformation, and this is the value we saw. They said they were going to deliver it. They delivered it. It hasn't failed. We haven't hit that 70% failure rate that we talked about right at the beginning of the conversation. Is absolutely key. So I think, again, coming back to that communication, it's being willing to say, actually, we can go for a much weaker business case, something that provides lower levels of value, because we can guarantee to be able to deliver it. And sometimes that means that you can do some hand-in-hand risk taking. So actually it becomes based on value outcomes, and that contractually, maybe the solution will be delivered based on those value outcomes. Again, that comes back to the commercial question, which is always a challenge.
Brilliant, thank you. So it's 4 to 4, well, European time, Central European time, so we only have 4 minutes left. So that was our last question for today. We would love to carry on with such an interesting conversation for longer, but it's time to bring it to a close. Any questions that have not been answered, we will try to answer them through our LinkedIn company page, so stay tuned. And as you know, we try to host this kind of event twice a year at least, and we normally poll to see what you want us to talk about, so stay tuned to our company website. I want to thank all of our panelists for such an amazing contribution today, and our fantastic audience for finding the time to join us. And a special thank you to Teresa Català and Charlotte Eyre, who have been working endlessly in the background to make possible this roundtable. If you would like to take part of similar discussions, or you want to be a panelist, stay tuned to our company website or message us privately. Thank you for coming, and see you soon.
Thank you.